So welcome everybody to our final session of Degrowth Week. It's been such a great week and I've managed to meet so many wonderful people and get re-inspired on lots of ways. So thanks so much for coming along and for coming to this last session. Before we get going, I'll hand over to Tonié to give us a bit of an acknowledgement.
Sure. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. It's great to have almost 30 people. Awesome. So just acknowledging that I'm on Woiwurrung land, and just paying respects to elders, and the accumulated knowledge that they have of 65,000 years plus of amazing knowledge that they've accumulated, and that we still have much to learn from. And yeah, just wishing the younger generation of Indigenous folks who've connected with their heritage, hoping that they can be supported and do what they need to do to keep the whole thing going. And just acknowledging that we're on stolen land and that we still need to have sovereignty ceded. Yeah, so pay the rent if you can. It's a big thing, pay the rent. And yes, thanks.
Thanks so much, Tonié. Now I'm just going to share my screen to show you what this little slideshow that we made up this morning. So this is what we're in for today. Where to from here? So degrowth in Australia. And so firstly, this is the 10 sessions that we did.
Yeah,
I'm not going to do the intro of, you know, what is degrowth and what is DNA and what is NENA, because I'm sure a lot of you have already know that, and we can always go back and look. But yeah, together between Degrowth Network Australia and the New Economy Network Australia, we put on these 10 webinars, which was quite a feat, but they all went really, really well. And we're really, really excited. I'm really excited to go back and rewatch a bunch of them. But we thought we'd start today by, we'll kind of share some reflections. I've seen some of you have already started putting stuff in the doc, which is great. And yeah, this is being recorded. So a few of us are going to start with some reflections, and then I will invite a few of you folks to put up your hands if you're willing to be part of the recording and kind of say a bit of your reflections. And then we're going to go into breakout rooms for anyone who's interested. And so, yeah, then we'll have more time to kind of talk about what we're already doing and what where we're going next. And then we'll kind of come back together, hear from the breakout rooms, and then we'll end the formal proceedings, and then we'll go into a more informal discussion for folks that want to stay around. So that's the kind of plan. The formal stuff shouldn't be more than an hour. Oh yeah, Tonié, do you want to add something?
Yeah, just with the breakout rooms, we were thinking to put everybody in groups of where they mostly are active or living. Is this right, Anisa?
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you're in your name, I think this is the idea. Can you put where you are, and then we can group breakout rooms according to who is close to each other. And having said that, we won't know where everywhere is. So maybe if you're local, then you can have a look through who just happens to be around the corner.
Yeah, all good. Yeah. So yeah, if at any point you can put in your name kind of what city or state. If it's a small town we might not have heard of, then put that. But yeah, so yeah, if you can put that, you just have to press rename, so you add it to your Zoom name. But also you can chuck it in the chat and I'll do my best.
Oh yeah, cool.
So yeah, while we're sorting that, we'll start with a few reflections.
Yeah.
And I'll go first. I wanted to mention the in midweek we had, I think my favorite session was the Wednesday morning Crazy Town, where we had these podcasters from the Post Carbon Institute over in the States, and they like to talk about, what a crazy world that we're in, and how energy is being used and the planet is getting destroyed, but they add a lot of humor. There was a lot of humor. So for the midweek, a Wednesday morning, it was so satisfying after so much of the kind of heavy conversations to have a bit of a laugh. And I highly recommend people go back to that one if you missed it. It was also great because they kept making jokes about Australia. They love to make fun of us, and we love to make fun of them, which was a good bit of fun. Sarah, did you want to give a reflection?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Anisa. I still have to catch up on some recordings because I haven't been able to make each session live. But the standout for me so far probably was last night's degrowth and food. I really liked Tammy's presentation. I mean, the other presenters were fantastic, and Callum was great at facilitating. I just think too, food is somewhere where I feel like I can actually do something now as an individual to, degrow, if that makes sense, because you can actually control where you buy your food from, and you can try and grow it. So I think it's sort of something small, but ends up being in the bigger picture of a big contribution. So I really took a lot from the food webinar last night, but I am looking forward to catching up on the rest and watching Crazy Town, because I really wanted to see the hilarity one. But they've all been fantastic, and
Thanks, Sarah. Sandy, did you want to give a reflection?
Yeah, for sure. And same with you, Sarah. I have to catch up on some recordings. But so far from what I watched, the webinar that stood out for me the most was the session on Tuesday evening with Boone Brene from Friends of the Earth in Europe and Jocelyn Keddy from Recycle Lebanon. And the session was looking at how others are working to achieve degrowth on the ground. And Jocelyn's stories in particular they were humbling, enlightening, inspiring. So she shared with us about what is currently happening in Lebanon, the societal collapse at the moment that's going on over there, the government, there's no president, they only get about an hour of electricity at the moment, bank accounts are locked out, that kind of stuff. And what her work is doing with Recycle Lebanon on the ground was just so it's inspiring. And I think we brought in the link to donate to Recycle Lebanon. But basically what inspired me the most was, going beyond, taking degrowth. It's one thing to educate about what degrowth is, but let's actually start doing work on the ground in whatever form that may look like for us in Australia here. So just hearing her stories just was so motivating. If anyone missed it, I really recommend it. I didn't even know about what was happening in Lebanon. That was incredibly humbling for me. So that was my highlight.
Thanks so much, Sandy. Tonié, what was one of your highlights?
The Jocelyn story, as Sandy's saying, I just really enjoyed meeting the Crazy Town, like those two crazy intelligent goons. I just love their style, and I think they've got a real there's something really unique and I think that they've got to offer, because it is such a kind of, it can go down this kind of doom and gloom pathway so easily, and they're actively working against that, and they sort of work with it in a way and turn it around and sort of have a laugh about the whole thing. And I think humor is something that really has a lot to contribute to this whole movement. I think we're going to really need it, and as well as that sort of conviviality thing. So that was great. But and so Jocelyn's story, and I think I do want to, I'll put in the link to donate because one of the things to donate to Recycle Lebanon, which is Jocelyn's main kind of organisation, I think that it was Anita Nelson's point in the opening session that like we're going to have to hold hands across the earth. And so supporting people who are really doing amazing things against all odds in like financially poor and like broken down societies, we need to do that, because I just don't think the current system is going to produce that kind of what do you call it, philanthropy, not philanthropy, the wrong word. Yeah, so that to me is really important. We have so much privilege here. I know we're all trying to survive here, but crikey, it's a different level over there. Yeah.
Thank you, Tonié.
And Mary, sorry, one more thing, Mary Graham's generosity. Yeah, I think Mary, yeah, whatever you're getting an Indigenous person to share, and in something like this, I think, you know, I'm always aware that we are on their land still, and, you know, look what happened to it, you know, and I think that they have incredible generosity with their time. They've had to work through so much to go, oh yeah, I'm happy to share my stuff with all of you. Like that takes a lot of work internally. So yeah.
Thanks heaps. Is there anyone else here that wants to share a bit of a reflection or a highlight or something they really took away? Oh yes, Noni.
I worked at the UN for a number of years, and I became very aware that what happened was the lowest common denominator was what got put forward. So right from the very start, the UN couldn't make enough noise about climate to really get people to change. And we're still at that stage where there's this ridiculous idea called bright siding, which means that you don't focus too much on the negative and you just emphasize the positive, which is all very well. But what we realized from what we've listened to this week is that we're going to hell in a basket. We have actually passed the tipping point on so much, and nobody will speak the truth to it, because it's a bit like I suppose you've heard this morning that our Australian head of our Reserve Bank he's become the fall guy. All these, everyone's so angry at him, so they had to get rid of this poor man who was only doing what's conventional economics, which we all know isn't going to work. But the point I'm trying to make is we've looked through these amazing talks, and you covered nearly every aspect of it, except perhaps the psychological one, which is where if people are going to actually eventually do something, we've got to take them through a process of accepting. It's a little bit like death and grief, you know, the cycle that you go through. You deny it's happening, and then you start bargaining, etc., and eventually you come out the other end. And there's no big organization that I know of in Australia trying to do anything like that, because we've got to tell the truth. We don't have until 2050. I'll be long gone by then, but I feel that I've gone through and I've come out with all the work I've done in the environmental area over the last 14 years or so. I have just come out with the recognition that we've lost the game, unless we do something absolutely drastic and that we spread this word. What somebody mentioned that we're talking to the converted in this group, and of course we are all part of the converted. How do we reach the millions that need to be reached without getting ourselves swamped? I mean, that would be a great discussion right now, if you'd be willing to take it on. So that's my tuppence worth.
Thanks so much, Noni. Some really good questions. Ken.
Yeah, thanks, Anisa. I'd like to follow up what Noni said in joining her and expressing concern about the need to be prepared, the need for all of us to, of course, recruit far-sighted minds to our cause the degrowth principle needs to be fleshed out in local communities to see what aspects of it could be applied now. However, that's not going to be a particularly easy task, but inspired by the recent portraits of what it's like to be a degrowth activist in Lebanon now, I just refer, as I did on the Wednesday session on jobs and employment, to the coming disorganization crisis time. If you think COVID was a pretty bad experience, it was certainly unprecedented in my life, and I'm over 80. The coming dislocations in governance, indeed, not just in services and all that stuff and work, but in just control and order. The coming disruptions we face from climate change are going to allow and expose opportunities for very necessary focus on essentials of living. And if we think we're only small groups of people in the background now, there'll be much opportunity for people like ourselves to insist on practical and necessary changes in local communities as well as in wider polities. It'd be very important for us to influence others then, when everybody is more alert to the need for wisdom in change, as we were during COVID. It'll be really important for us to put our learning and our understanding and our practice out there for pilot programs, for experimental change. And I hope that the week's discussions can cement in our minds the importance that we can bring for that sort of change to the wider community, because they will be very much more receptive then when disaster is upon us than they are now. Thanks, Anisa.
Yeah, thanks so much, Ken. Yeah, this is really great. And yeah, I think people are taking notes of everything people are saying, so we can think about what further conversations we want to have. Nick.
Right, thanks, Anisa. I've got to say, some of the gems from this week actually occurred in the after parties. I got to about 3 sessions, and the stop recording button got hit, and then like the good stuff really came out. And a big shout out to Tammy yesterday with food. And it wasn't the food conversation; it was about the how do we learn to get along? How do we learn to actually cooperate in times not of when things are great, but when things are tough and so on. So a bit of a follow-up with Tammy would be amazing there. But I think just picking up on some of the comments there, part of something that I did share was just around the framing of degrowth. It doesn't necessarily hold the appeal that others are offering. So some may be familiar with the sort of concept of the eco-modernist, the crew that sort of say, well, we've just got to put the accelerator foot down on technology and turbocharge technology to find all of the solutions to our sort of complex challenges. And of course, that has enormous appeal because it says you don't need to change anything. You just have to encourage investment in technology. So degrowth is a little bit up against it in terms of having a different narrative that's going to appeal and engage a wider audience. And I think we've heard some of that this week in terms of actually experiencing degrowth. What other sort of richness does it bring in our lives, which is often empty in a technology-rich world. So framing is definitely something that I want to kind of capture and sort of focus on going forward. I did talk about a bit of theatre that I've been engaged in years ago, the Cycle for Sustainability, and a theatre that we took to communities, to schools and so on. And the real clincher for us was when some grade 9 students came up and said, hey, you guys, you hit some really kind of heavy issues, but not in a kind of preachy way. And it was kind of cool. And so I think, happy to sort of bring that to others and think about, as you said, the crazy town folk, they're using really creative means by which to engage in the heavy stuff. They're And I guess the learning I took from Terry and others in this week is that we might not have everything in place, you know, that the new world that we would like to see in place at the time when some things really do fall apart and collapse. We don't have to force the collapse. I think in many respects it's happening. But I think really the point in some ways is much of the work we're doing is creating the blueprint such that when things get tough, that is where people gravitate. Because I think right now, if things got tough next week, I can see there's going to be a whole lot of chaos, violence, upheaval, because people have not been prepared with as possible different ways. Whereas if there are many of us working to create different ways, even though they might not be fully implemented, at least there'll be a few little signposts to go, well, actually, we can do food a bit differently. We can transport ourselves a bit differently, and so on. So yeah, so that's where my thinking's at. It's kind of like we're not averting the collapse, we're creating the blueprints which enable a kind of healthy transition, or the most just transition as things get a bit tougher going forward. So anyway, there's my little reflections. Yeah, look forward to keeping the conversation going.
Yeah, thanks heaps, Nick. And ever since I found out about your skit, I've been telling lots of people. I'm so excited. I think more skits. And if we can reach the Year 9 boys, I think that's one of the highest bars to get across some messaging. So exciting. Marita, did you want to share some reflections? We can't hear you. Oh, yep. Maybe we can see you now. Hello.
Sorry, guys. I could not find out how to make my picture come up, but hello. Thank you for very much for everything. It's just been amazing. But I just wanted to reflect about perhaps the spiritual side of things and how we're going to have to be resilient. And I recently did a course in community. What was it? It was community disaster management training. So it was with my community. I live in a bushfire prone area. And so we did this community resilience course, which was over 2 weekends. And we did a lot of, it was kind of like a military training thing, but it was really good because it actually forced us into situations where we felt uncomfortable, where there might be a disaster. Community leadership program it was, and I really recommend everybody do it because it brought out a lot of sort of aspects like our blind spots, how we interact with people. And it was basically about the fact that in an emergency situation, you've got the top-down linear mode of the emergency services people, but in small communities, which I live in one of those, you really need a circular. What happens actually is that it's a circular thing that happens. So you get people gathering at a certain place, you get people making sandwiches, you get people reaching out in a circular sort of way. And it's about the enmeshing of those two paradigms and how that can actually happen on the ground. And yeah, so, and I just wanted to say a couple of other things. I've just been doing a lot of active hope. I don't know if anyone's heard of active hope. And it's a practice that you do weekly, if possible. It's sort of like yoga practice, but for your brain. And it's all about facing up to what's happening, but also acknowledging it and then working out what you can do in your space. So moving forward, like what can you do here? So I've been thinking about a lot of stuff, and I've read this beautiful book called Sand Talk. And it's about an Indigenous, I don't know if anyone's read it, but it's fantastic. And they talk about respect, they talk about the order of decision-making, which I've written this down and I've got it on my desk and I just look at it every day. And it's the first thing about decision-making is it's an Indigenous perspective and it's about respect. So you go with you, yes, Joanna Macy, that's right. Thank you, Lena, thank you. Yeah, so respect is from your gut. So I think we had one of the speakers who said, just feel into your gut, feel into what picture you want to draw. And that was that linear model or the circular model, and everybody seems to do the circular model for the future. So, yeah, so really I think it's really about slowing down and just feeling what needs to be done. And I feel like the land around you will tell you what needs to be done. Wherever you are, the land holds the knowledge, and if you can just slow down and listen to it, it will tell you where to head, where to go. And then the second one is connect, which is where you connect with other people through your heart. And then the next one is reflect, which is shared knowledge, and that's your head. So that's where the intellect comes in there, but only there. It first starts with the gut. And then direction is with your hands. So that's gut, then heart, then head, and then hands at the end. And I just feel like if we kind of incorporate that into our special super power, everybody's got a superpower. And whatever your superpower is, I think that's what you should focus on. And also something that I learned in that resilience program that we did was the saying, slow is smooth and smooth is fast. So when there's a disaster, everybody tends to panic and freak out, and not a lot actually gets done. But if you can just slow down, then you can move in a smooth way forward, and that ultimately leads to a good result, or the best result that you can have. So in this resilience program, we talked about you can't fix everything, but you can make stuff a little bit better. So yeah, anyway, I hope I haven't spoken too long, but that's just my reflection. So thank you for everyone for all the work you've done. It's fantastic.
Thanks so much, Marita. And we've got some great, in the chat, people are chucking in ideas, and yeah, Nick, who seems to do so many different things, is facilitating check-in sessions and workshops about active hope. So I look forward to going along myself. I think, Alex, you wrote in the chat that you wanted to share something, so we'll go to you. Hello.
Hello, everyone. Firstly, it's to thank you for some amazing sessions. I've only attended 3, but I look forward to catching up. So maybe my question's redundant and I've missed something, but yeah, I would like to see more material about the implementation of degrowth and how we can go from where we're at to a more climate safe society and economy. And I particularly enjoyed, of course, the Crazy Town folks yesterday and on Wednesday. And I think rather than, as well, it's obviously great that we speak together, but rather than talking in our bubble, there's an opportunity for us to have this message out there. And it occurred to me, and Nick mentioned the eco-modernists, and from listening to the Crazy Town podcast, I thought it'd be wonderful to have a debate. The question I really wanted to ask the Crazy Town guys was, are there debates online that we could look at which are sort of degrowthers versus eco-modernists, alternative visions of the future, how to get there, and if not, maybe it's something we could be involved in. I think both have strengths, but that could come out in a public debate in a way that would be helpful for the wider movement. And I think possibly that could be hosted at something like the Sustainable Living Festival, and we could have public debates so that people can sort of pick and choose the best from both streams.
That is such a great idea, Alex. And I am going to post in the chat. There was a debate between Jason Hickel and a green growther, which is a pretty good debate. I recommend watching, but I think.
Okay. Well, thank you everyone for coming today.
Sorry, I've started the video. Who's speaking? But I think having more local debates and ones that we can engage in more, I think that would be amazing. When I was in university, I got one of the neoclassical economics teachers to debate Samuel Alexander on is growth good? And it was such a fruitful discussion, especially having people in the same room together.
Yes.
And you're humanizing, you're not like, oh, you're the evil eco-modernist over there and we're the correct degrowthers over here. You want to get to know each other more. So I would love to work with you, and if anyone else here is interested in getting that going, That would be amazing. Thanks, Alex. Oh wait, Rog, you keep putting your hand up and taking it down. Do you want to speak?
If no one's else, sorry, I sort of don't engage with the chat, so I don't know what's going on in the chat. It was just quick reflection on the week. It's awesome. I'm still digesting. That's the short version. I just had a comment on someone's reflection, or should I save that?
Go for it.
Okay, it was just a practical thing on the active hope grieving type thing that a couple of people have mentioned in really wonderful ways. There's an online version of those workshops that run 10 sessions via Zoom, and I don't know when and how they're running, but it's a thing called the Good Grief Network, and it's constructed around the sort of climate crisis. And I've done most of it, and it's sort of that Joanna Macy type thing, and it's really awesome, and it kind of goes into all kinds of fabulous stuff. So if people can't get a little huddle in their neighborhood or whatever, there's an option, and it's called Good Grief Network. I haven't followed up when they're next running a new group or something, but yeah, that was just that one.
Yeah. Thanks heaps, Rog. No, there's some really good resources out there, and yeah, there is some stuff in the chat. I think at one point we're going to have to go through all the chats and like pull out all of the good stuff so we can make kind of a list of good resources and places to go for people, because there's just so much gold coming in, but definitely can't follow it all. So if anyone does feel like later on sorting through some chats, I'm sure there'll be a bunch of little admin-y tasks that I think me and Sarah and Tonié, we cannot, and Michelle can't do on our own.
Yeah, please, someone jump in, like.
But I'm wondering if there's no other hands up. I think it'd be really, really good for us to spend a good 10-15 minutes in some breakout rooms with some people who live closer to where we are. And I've put some questions in our notes for you to talk about. I mean, but also feel free to talk about whatever you want when you're in your breakout rooms. But some stuff there was like, what are you already doing? What further discussions do you want? We've already heard some really good ideas about, framing and how to put this into practice, and those sort of things. But yeah, brainstorm what sort of discussions, and then what do you want to work on in the future? So you as the person coming along, because this stuff only happens when we do it. And it takes organizing, and there's those of us that are really willing to support you to run whatever you think is good, and hook up with other people either locally or on the other side of the country or even the world. We've had some international guests to kind of organize things online. So I think there's some people who are newer in the chat. Oh, hey everybody. So sorry to drag you out of your rooms. The ones I popped in, you were having some really great conversations. So we thought we'd kind of do the roundup kind of bit, and then I can put people back into your breakout rooms. So if you have an unfinished conversation, then feel free to write that in the chat, and I can open up some breakout rooms again so people can continue the conversations. But also, yeah, we'll stay around to kind of keep having the chats. I know that Lena had a bit of reflection that they want to share, so that we'll kind of stick around for anyone that wants to hear from Lena, and then keep chatting. But the formal little roundup bit, I just wanted to, where'd the slides go? There we go. To let you know what we're up to as DNA and NENA, to make sure that if you want to come along with us, that you know how. And so yeah, DNA, which is Degrowth Network Australia, we meet once a month, and so we have a national gathering which is on Zoom, and it usually starts by people sharing what's happening in the different parts of the country and what people are up to. Sometimes we get a guest speaker along to kind of talk about degrowth in housing and or we had Ted Trainer along before, who's been doing work on degrowth for a long time. So try and learn what's already happening and have a bit of a discussion. And then we kind of open it up to planning. So one of the things that we're planning is to all go to the NENA conference in November in Canberra, maybe catch the train or carpool together and stay together and hang out in person for those of us who can. So yeah, those are the DNA national gatherings. And the next one is Wednesday, the 19th of July at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then we also have a local Kulin Nation Melbourne group, and we meet the first Wednesday of every month in person and kind of do a similar thing, but then we get to share a meal together afterwards. And as more members join from different parts of the country, we're happy to hook people up so that you can have your own local gatherings and share some food and talk about degrowth. So that's kind of how we work, and we invite you to be part of it. You can email Degrowth Network at proton.me. And yeah, myself or someone else will answer your email and put you on the email lists. And we have a Slack, which is like an online discussion space, which is still a bit slow, but the more of us that jump on and ask more questions, the more chatter happens. And then one of the things that Degrowth Network in Melbourne we're planning is a spring festival. So Sunday, October 8th, for any of you that can come in person, we've got a little spot by the Merry Creek, and there'll be art and dancing, and food and little stalls from lots of different groups, so we can all see all the degrowth things that are happening, maybe a seedling swap, some talks and workshops. So highly encourage people to get involved. And we do have a little flyer. If Sandy, you could chuck that in the chat. We will email it out to everybody, but so that's what DNA are up to. And NENA, New Economy Network Australia, Sarah's just been telling me that after Degrowth Week, they are focusing on the conference, which I'm so excited for. It's going to be in person. So for those of you who can't come along, we might do local gatherings around so you can feed in and hear back, or we'll do a report back or something. But for those of you who can come in person, I think it's such a special opportunity to be able to spend 3 days together. And I'm sure the conference is going to look amazing. I think it's still open if you want to put in workshop ideas. And us in DNA have already started about, like, we've got a few that we're going to put on together, hopefully have some specific gathering time. And I'm talking to a friend in Canberra who might be able to find us a place to camp or stay, so we can be together and hang out at night. So put that in your calendar if it's something that you are able to get to. And then also, yeah, NENA has a whole lot of different hubs around specific issues. And so, yeah, jump on the NENA website or email Sarah at nena@neweconomy.org.au, and she can point you in the direction of wherever. But that's our formal proceedings for the week. And now we'll start the after party, as I think it was you, Nick, who called it. I love that.